Now that Israel and Iran have agreed on a ceasefire, a U.S. brokered ceasefire, the big question everyone is asking, what comes next? Will this hold? Will Iran indeed give up its nuclear plans? Will it make peace with Israel? Will it recognize Israel? Will it cease to develop ballistic missiles to attack Israel? Or is it just buying time? Because we haven't heard Iran surrender, unconditional surrender as President Trump asked for, demanded. What comes next? So the best case scenario, of course, is that true peace with Iran, true peace with that region, and for the first time perhaps in all of history, the Middle East becomes a peaceful place. Cooperation, coexistence, respect. And that, of course, leads the entire world to a better place. So a new world order, a truly historical event. Worst case scenario, the tensions continue, but there will be a point where this will come to an end. So please join me as we discuss the implications of the current ceasefire following that 12-day war and where we're headed. Please join me in this discussion titled Ceasefire. What's next? Hi, this is Simon Jacobson, and we'll be discussing Ceasefire. What's next? This program is dedicated by Elisha Wiesel in loving memory of his parents Eli and Marion Wiesel. So the big question everyone's asking, after the U.S. brokered ceasefire between Israel and Iran, which followed a 12-day war, what will happen next? Because on one hand, some are pointing out President Trump had demanded unconditional surrender and a total end, an unequivocal end to any Iran's aspirations for nuclear weapons. We haven't heard that stated. On the other hand, you can argue that all their nuclear capabilities have been rendered essentially non-functional, and their military has been seriously weakened by Israel's onslaught. So in effect, they have been defanged. But the world is still, everyone is still in a tentative mode. Will Iran indeed give up its nuclear aspirations? Development of ballistic missiles against Israel. Will it recognize Israel? Will it make peace with Israel? That, of course, is the hope. Or will it continue with its militant and violent call for the destruction of Israel? Either way, events have been put into motion, that are definitely going to change that region, as I've discussed in my previous programs from the day we began this battle. As I shared, I was in Israel literally hours before Operation Rising Lion was launched on Friday morning, leaving one of the last flight out of Israel, spending time a few hours earlier at the wall with President Javier Milei of Argentina, together with Prime Minister Netanyahu. 12 days later, Netanyahu returned to the wall and said, I have placed a note here 12 days ago, and I'm placing another note that the lion has risen. So clearly there's also the acknowledgement and recognition that this is more than just a military war. There's a spiritual dimension to it. And that Israel recognizes the need for God's help. And as I've been discussing, there are cosmic, historic, spiritual, psychological implications that have been set into motion, leading to a new world order. There's no question about that. The question is how fast it will take. So again, the hope is that this will indeed usher in an era of peace in a region that has been ravaged for centuries, if not millennia, of battles. And in many ways, there is a spiritual religious battle. Because then what is really driving Iran's hatred of Israel? Is it land? Is it resources? No. It's a certain Muslim, radical Muslim rejection, or worse than that, absolute war against Jews in Israel. However it's couched. And we know from the different prophecies and the different statements made in many different places that at the end there will be confrontations between Persia, which is essentially Iran. It was renamed Iran. It was renamed from Persia to Iran in the 20th century. The language is still called Farsi, which is essentially Persian. The battles that will rage there, battles against Israel, battles with the Roman, Western, Christian civilization, the clash of civilizations, as has been coined. And that will be the end story. And then there will be peace. It'll usher in a new age of permanent peace, because ultimately the ultimate battle is the battle between what is God's cosmic larger plan, and how do we integrate it into our world. As long as any religion feels it has to be the dominant one and therefore destroy the others, there will never be peace. In many ways, that is what drives especially Muslim radicalism, Muslim fundamentalism. I've discussed a number of times Sayyid Qutb, Qutb. So even though I believe he's from the Sunnis, but there are obviously common denominators with the Shiites, arguing for jihad, religious war, against the infidels. And who are the infidels? The Jews and the Christians. And that's why you hear often the words, the Crusader Zionist conspiracy. Now if you trace it all back, it goes back to the house and tent of Abraham, whose son Yishmael would be the ancestor of the Ishmaelites, the Arab Muslim world in general terms. Isaac, the ancestor of the Jewish people. Esav, son of Isaac, the ancestor of the Roman Christian, Western Christian world. And Jacob, his twin brother, Esav's twin brother, again, son of Isaac, the ancestor of the Jewish people. And those battles began there. It was all a battle of bringing a higher state of consciousness and morality into a world. But how do you do it? Do you do it through war? Do you do it through kindness? Do you do it through love? And what happens when there's a clash between the material and the spiritual? Materialism is clearly antithetical to the spiritual. The ultimate answer is the answer of integration, spiritualizing the material, not destroying it. But there's that tendency when you see something that you consider heresy. So Qutb calls for a war, a true war, claiming that the Muslims have replaced the Christians, who have replaced the Jews as the chosen people. Now with that attitude, obviously Christianity and Judaism are a threat. Hence, United States as the great Satan, Israel as the small Satan. And Islam must dominate. And when the mullahs and the ayatollahs of Iran take that literally, you have the call for Israel's destruction, and United States destruction for that matter. I know that Qutb who was for the record, was executed by President Nasser in Egypt in 1966. So I know he was the teacher, the mentor of bin Laden. But that's more of a Sunni thinking. I don't know his effect on the Shiites and the Iranian theology. But generally, the same principles. So peace means not the destruction of Islam, but the taming of Islam. That's the ultimate goal. And I say that because when you think ahead, many people think just technically, let's just get rid of nuclear threats, ballistic missiles, let Iran recognize Israel, let there be peace. But that's on a practical, technical level. There's a deeper force here at work. Peace will only come when there's the deeper spiritual integration and the recognition that the Jewish people are a necessary component, and that Abraham is the father of all nations, and ultimately Ishmael makes his peace with Isaac, and Esau makes his peace with Jacob. Now Esau has made peace with Jacob. When you think of the United States of America, many of the Western nations, is a form of peace, even though it's not perfect. But Ishmael, especially that part of the region, the Persians, that needs to be reconciled. And indeed, the Talmud tells us that the two nations that will prevail till the coming of Mashiach is the Roman and the Persians. With the emphasis that at the end, the Romans, meaning the Western, will dominate and control the Persians, which in a sense is what just happened now. With obviously Israel and the Jews involved, more than involved, leading the way. But with American bombing, the US bombing of Iran, and essentially that's Rome, Malchus Edom, the Edomites, vanquishing the Persians. So that's the end story, is not just technical peace, but spiritual peace, theological, ideological. And that will require a shift in the consciousness and the education of the next generation of Muslims. And for that matter, education of everyone. There are things that the Israeli children have to also be taught. And that is, for there to be a truly healthy and balanced world, we need a healthy balance and integration between the morality and the ethics and the virtues that God expects of us and our personal lives. That's when will be true coexistence. Because as long as anyone thinks that they're superior to the other and they can destroy the other, that means we're not accepting the principle that all of us are created in the divine image. After October 7th, I released a video, which now has been translated into Arabic and received a lot of response from that part of the world. It was called A Call to My Muslim, an open letter or open call to my Muslim cousins and friends, where I said, Abraham, our grandfather that we all share, what would he say to you? That's the blueprint. So when we say what comes next, what's next? That's where we want to go to. And we have to have that vision. It's a vision that recognizes the value of every individual, recognizes and respects the dignity of the diversity of different people, and the diversity of nations and cultures and religions, but also recognizes that it's all under one God and nobody monopolizes and nobody can call for the destruction of the other. The ultimate export of Israel is stated in a verse in the book of Isaiah in the beginning. From Zion will come Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. What does Torah mean and what is the word of God? It means the recognition that for life to be successful and healthy, even on a secular level, we need to answer to a higher calling. The founding fathers recognized that. Consciously or subconsciously, when they wrote that all men are created equal, all people are created equal, and have, by virtue of that, inalienable rights that endowed to them by the Creator freedom, free expression, freedom of religion, etc., they recognized the words of the Bible that applies to every human being on this earth, that every human being was created in the divine image. And yes, there is diversity. That's part of the beauty, but not divisiveness. And that's our challenge. When that becomes the number one export of Israel, the world will be a very different world. But we're very close. So when I hear Netanyahu never really acknowledged or stated publicly, wrapped in a talit, those prayers that he said, you start sensing that there's a recognition of a higher calling. When President Trump acknowledges God and thanks God, invokes the name of God, when President Milei does the same, Argentina, you sense a paradigm shift. But it hasn't caught on entirely yet. And that's what we should be fighting for. The recognition of that higher consciousness. That's Messianic consciousness. That's what all this should be leading to. I wish there'd be a world leader that would get up and say exactly that to everyone. And demand, say to Israel, it's in your Torah, it's in the Torah that, it's a universal Torah, but in your Torah it says that from Zion will come Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. What is that word of God? Of how to deal with this diversity. And let's teach it to our children. Let's teach it to the next generation. That's the true next steps. So we can focus on the ceasefire itself. Is it real? Was it imposed? Is it going to lead to a better future? Will there be setbacks? What we need to focus on is the next steps, the bigger picture. I sure hope that this message gets to President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu and the leaders of Iran. I will do everything possible to make sure it's translated. And I will send it to my dear friend President Milei as well, who definitely has a role here to play. His conviction, his moral clarity, his being there just hours before the operation. And we have to make sure that this is what the contagious message that has to spread virally in a positive way. The domino effect, the butterfly effect, the ripple effect. And means it's a message to each one of us individually. It's not just observing the events, which is yet another expression of the voyeurism of us watching the news. We have to be part of making the news. What do we tell ourselves and our families and our children? We also have diversity. We may even have conflicts. But let's rise higher. Let's find that common denominator, that we are all part of a cosmic orchestra, a cosmic symphony. And each of us has to play our unique music. And we need each other. We complement each other. All 8 billion of us on this earth. This is the time for a call like that. And it's never been more fertile, more ripe moment. With everyone on edge. And we have everyone's attention. Everyone's receptive. Everyone's vulnerable. We're all wondering with the uncertainty of the future. Where is this all headed? So 2 things, it's headed toward that total harmony. And number 2, we're part of making it happen. So it's not just observing, bystander, spectator sports, but we are part of the plan. And it's something we need to become aware of and make others aware of. There's so much ignorance out there. Ignorance. Ignorance can lead to malicious behavior. But it begins with ignorance. An absence of understanding the dynamics of what define human beings, or define our common destiny. Sometimes it takes crisis to wake us up. The United States and the Founding Fathers recognized these truths that they consider to be we hold them to be self-evident. After crisis, they were being oppressed by King George of Great Britain, and they finally had to break free. Crisis is what brings out our greatest strengths. The Jewish people, after their long, 2-century-old bondage and slavery and genocide under the Egyptians, it forged them into a powerful, resilient nation that is here till this day. As they were oppressed, we're told, they flourished and they thrived and they blossomed. So too may these events now serve as a wake-up call. First the events in Gaza, then later now in Iran, and everything over and in between and over and under, and especially over the last decades. That would be the only way to redeem all the pain and the loss and the tragedies of these wars. To recognize that these wars are being fought not in vain, and not just getting back to square one, but hopefully a wake-up call to everyone that this is a time to embrace that higher truth that Abraham taught us over 3,800 years ago. That the focus and mission of our lives is to bring lasei tzedakah or mishpat, to do charity, to be virtuous and just and kind, and to teach that to our children and infuse it in our homes and make that the calling of our generation. Abraham taught that a long time ago, but it was not embraced immediately. It was only his children and those that were influenced by him, a small group of people. The rest of the world were pagans who were not interested in a higher calling. They had their calling, self-interest. And that is what dominated for so many centuries and millennia. But the children of Abraham, namely Yishmael, and before that Esau, meaning the Christians, did begin to embrace these teachings. At Sinai, we're told that God actually offered the Torah that comes from Zion. He offered it to the children of Esau and the children of Yishmael. And as the Talmud that I mentioned earlier says, they were the two, that Persia, which is Yishmael, and Rome, are the two main nations that God offered the Torah to. And ultimately, they did embrace at least parts of it. And they will embrace all of it. And what are we embracing? Embracing a world where not dog eats dog and survival of the fittest, and therefore war dominates because one's interests conflict with another's, and the only way to resolve that is through war. To recognize, no, there's a higher force at work. And we're all children of Abraham. And we're all creatures of God, children of God. That's the calling of our times. How do we convey and disseminate this message to every person on this earth? That's the biggest challenge. I am dedicated to that, as well as my team. And I hope you join us. And I say us, I don't mean we're part of it. My feeling is that all of us should embrace it as our own. It's not embracing one organization or one team, this should be a universal calling, a universal clarion call to each of us. That's where this is headed. That's what the end story is. And we will be able to say that in the year 2025, we were part of making it happen. We were part of embracing the higher calling, understanding how it fits into our lives, and how we require the cooperation and the cross-pollination with others that are not necessarily like ourselves, of the other religions. A total cooperation where all the nations of the world, in their diversity, the children of Yishmael, the children of Esau, the children of Isaac and Jacob, and all cultures and all races will recognize that we are all part of a larger tapestry, all necessary and all complementing each other in a cosmic symphony. Yes, a cosmic symphony. And we have responsibilities to act on it. So may this be the last bloodshed, the last casualties, the last tragedies. May the hostages be completely released and the wars in Gaza conclude as well. All ushering in a new age, a new world order of peace and harmony. A world where there be no more evil and destruction, because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. As stated in the book of Isaiah. May that be quickly and immediately, and may we do our part of introducing that in our personal lives, in our collective lives, our communities, our workplaces, our homes, and may it spread like one flame lighting another flame, without the first one getting diminished, only stronger, to every corner of this earth. Thank you so much. This has been Simon Jacobson of Meaningful Life Center, meaningfullife.com. Please, if this message was meaningful to you, please share it with others. Please subscribe to our offerings at meaningfullife.com, to our growing YouTube channel. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your feedback. Be blessed and be well. May we and our countries and the world experience the true new world order of total peace and harmony.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.